And we are live. Welcome to everyone for the new episode of this YouTube series, where we as Luna.ai interview over 100 sales professionals to basically try to understand what the ultimate sales AI looks like. And of course, we do not want to keep that information just for us. We want to share it with everyone listening here. I'm joined today by Connor Anderson, but before I give him the floor to introduce him, I wanted to give a quick introduction myself. I'm Steven, one of the founders of Luna.ai. And with Luna.ai, as you probably know, we are trying to build the ultimate sales AI. We're really focused on lead generation at this moment, meaning that we'll find your perfect leads, we'll scrape the internet to find everything there is to find, and then use that information to write mind-blowing sales emails. But as you know, we want to do much more than that, and that's why we're going to ask Connor, in this case, a couple of questions. But before we dive into the details, Connor, could you please tell us a bit more about yourself and about Enklu?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, appreciate you having me, Steven. I am Connor Anderson. I am the head of sales and strategic partnerships for Enklu, which is the world's only creator, operator, and now licenser of headset-based augmented reality experiences for entertainment venues.
That's very cool. That's very cool. Can you tell us a bit more about how that works? Like, what kind of entertainment do you do? Like, what can people expect from Enklu?
Yeah, so based in the real world, imagine you have a completely empty room, and now you get a headset that is different from virtual reality. A lot of folks are familiar with virtual reality, where you're completely closed off. You're essentially transported to a different world. We focus on augmented reality, so the clear lens headsets where you can still see the room around you. You can still see the people that you're with, their facial expressions, even their eyes. So we really love that social aspect of it. But now there are holograms overlaid into the real world as well. So in our opinion, you kind of get the best of both worlds. This 3D holographic playground that's overlaid the actual space that the experience is hosted in. And then from a content standpoint, think of it like a movie theater. We'll typically have 2 or 3 different experiences or movies playing at one time, and we're constantly putting out new titles that are distributed then to our licensees.
That's so cool. That's really like this the entertainment of the future. I think escape rooms used to be like a very big hype where everyone was doing escape rooms all over the place. This is probably going to be the next thing. So that's awesome. Cool.
Totally.
Let's dive in. Maybe to sketch the situation a bit. Like, how long have you been working for Enklu at this moment?
Yeah, so I came on as head of sales a little over 2 years ago. It was at the right at the start. Really got hired on at the end of 2021. Really started right at the start of 2022.
Oh, so that was in the pandemic as well. That's an interesting time to try to sell in-person experiences.
Yeah. It was. It certainly was. We had done some custom solution development for Fortune 500 companies and different brands, so had some alternative revenue streams to keep the engines turning. But as soon as we all emerged out of the pandemic, the vast majority of the focus has been on the entertainment side.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And what did it look like when, basically, what did Enklu look like when you first started? Apart from, of course, like the pandemic and the different revenue streams, but if we focus on the stuff that you're working on right now, like what did the product and the team look like? And basically, tell us a bit more about how you get started there.
Yeah. So I'll try, and there's so many different directions I could take that. So I will try and answer it in a succinct way, which is, what our core product now is Versimmersive. So that is a brand that's our brand name. Enklu's kind of the software and the creative team behind it, but our brand name, our consumer name, that folks are going to start seeing or have seen across the US is Versimmersive. When I first started, we were operating one Versimmersive ourselves. So not only were we the software and the creators, development team of it, but we were also operating. And we had just this one location. And really what we were doing was trying essentially to get proof of concept for ourselves. Is there a business here? Is this something that people will really enjoy, that they'll like to go to? What's going to be the average ticket price, the average review, that sort of thing. But by no means was it like a packaged product. It was just this proof of concept experiment. We then opened another location in San Francisco coming out of the pandemic, then in Denver, then in Chicago. All the while, I'm head of sales, but at the end of the day, like, we're a small, scrappy startup, and we're trying to get this concept off the ground. So I was as much like operations and hopping in with that sort of stuff, and then in the background, still working with some of the Fortune 500 companies. All the while, we are thinking, how do we really scale this? A lot of those Fortune 500 projects aren't scalable. A lot of them are one and done. The content creation costs are very high. It's hard for either side to justify the bandwidth or the cost that it takes to pull that off. So this entertainment angle was very interesting. Can we get to a place where we can effectively license this out to others? And it was over the start of 2022, or excuse me, 23, that we started looking to license this. And that's where we got to, okay, what is this product? How do we package this? Who should we be selling it to? How should we position it? What should the website look like? The framing, everything that really kicked off no more than about 15 months ago.
That's so awesome. I can also imagine that, like, just getting started in your new role, there's this entire dynamic going on of like switching from different products and trying to figure out. That's also quite challenging, especially if you're the head of sales responsible for like the commercial development and basically the growth of the entire company. That you're trying to grow a product and a company that is still trying to figure stuff out. How did you experience that?
That's a really good question. And it is so accurate, because we still, at that time, as I mentioned, we're working with development teams. So at one point, I'm pitching creators on what are the efficiencies and the value of the software itself, and why you should use it versus a Unity or an Unreal. And then I have to hop on a call with a Fortune 500 company, Sprint or Verizon, and talk about a marketing activation and what the business value or case can be for that. Meanwhile, helping with this verse concept. So how did I manage it? A lot of it was working really closely with Ray, our CEO, who is the sharpest, one of the most incredible people I've ever been around, and the main reason that I'm at Enklu. So by all means, it was a ton of leaning on him for support. Nice. But at the same time, just going with my gut and trying to learn as quick as possible and keep the wheels moving like you need to in a startup.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's also like starting a commercial job at a company like that, at a life stage like that. It's very difficult to just focus on sales, right? So it's very difficult to just like start running with a product and trying to close as many deals as possible, because you're as much a product manager as a sales manager, so to say. Like it's like a two-way street of information, right? So from the product team to the customers, and then all the feedback back, and that's they're basically sort of like indirectly guinea pigging the product that they're trying to build, which is an interesting dynamic. Did you experience any pressure from the leadership team on like you being brought on as as well, the head of sales, so the one responsible for the company growth?
I wouldn't say pressure in the traditional sense. A lot of times, I think if folks would hear that, they'd expect a number put in front of me, and it's just, why aren't you hitting it, or hitting it fast enough, or whatever the case may be. The leadership team, which really was just Ray, for most of it was phenomenal, supportive. If we needed to get creative on bringing in a little extra revenue, it wasn't a you figure it out, it's a let's figure this thing out. So pretty fortunate to have a leader of that stature.
I can imagine. Yeah, there's a lot of other examples that do it in another way. Where that's also the reason why we ask, and that's also an interesting to see the dynamic, especially with like venture-backed companies. There's like this founder-led sales motion going on, and then they bring in the new sales hires based on like funding round that they just closed, and then let's
Yep.
like the investors pressuring the leadership team, and the leadership team thinking, okay, I just brought in salespeople, so you go
It all
figure it out.
trickles down. Yep.
Exactly. But that's very cool and very exciting to hear that wasn't the case for you.
Yeah, it's
Nice.
pretty lucky. Now I will say once we really package this first immersive concept and product now that we've licensed to 6 to 7 locations just in the last handful of months, that's where really the reins have been predominantly handed over. And naturally, I think it's good to feel pressure that, all right, we have a product, we have proof of concept. Now we need to
Exactly.
hit the exact goals. Now everything is very measurable, and we need to get there, which is both pressure but also exciting to have your blinders on and focused on a specific goal.
Exactly. And I can also imagine that gives a lot of how do you say that, a lot of focus, that you
Yeah,
think, okay, like, okay, we closed off this chapter, let's focus on this new product, and let's make it grow. But that's also
totally.
like that's actually a perfect bridge to the next question I wanted to ask you is, like as soon as you hit that moment that you basically basically move from the let's call it chaotic in the most positive sense of the word
Hmm.
phase where you're trying to figure everything out. You got your product market fit, you get some like initial market traction and stuff like that. How did you get started from there? Were you the only, maybe let's start there. Were you the only like salesperson, full-time focused salesperson in the team, or were you already expanding?
No, yeah, I was the only for probably the first couple of licensees that we brought on, and definitely putting together essentially what our initial sales kit was going to be for this product. So the brochures, the websites, the decks, the all of that. Yeah, I was the only one at that point, and I wouldn't say you completely shift out of chaos because you never nail it on the first go, and realistically, like, you're tweaking the pitch even now, but I mean you're tweaking the pitch literally at every call just based on what you heard on the last one. Like, maybe the framing should be a little bit better this way. This seemed to resonate a lot more. Maybe we should put more emphasis on this. Um, I uncovered these 2 or 3 needs that make all the sense in the world, but I didn't think about them initially. So it
Nice.
doesn't, and when you have call after, when you have a lot of calls and demos to go through, that level of iteration is chaotic in and of itself, but it is a better chaos, in my opinion, that you're chiseling away at something rather than figuring out which ice block to go after.
Exactly. You're basically like maneuvering less and less and less in that sense. How did you figure that out? Like it's a process. You're having a lot of call. You're getting like all of these different data points, or like qualitative and quantitative information points from all these different angles and different sources. How did you manage that? How did you figure out like, okay, maybe this USP is very important, or I see this pain point right now, or this narrative, this pitch. How did you approach that?
I think at first you just start off with common sense. Like, why do we think our product or our package will make the most sense for this set of buyers? And then you use those initial calls to validate it, and ask the questions and just pay close attention to what the reactions are. I mentioned, um, you know, just realizing something resonates a lot more with somebody, just being very attentive to what that is on those calls. Another big thing was um, we went to like the biggest industry trade show and exhibited, which we had like the crappiest booth in the entire place, just because we were that early on, and still trying to figure out, are these the right customers to go after? We weren't going to sink 50 grand or 100 grand into a booth. So we set up the MVP of a booth. But what was great of it, even though our display and the technology at the time it wasn't anywhere near where it is now, what was super helpful from that was being able to have like 100 conversations with who we think is our ICP, validate a ton of that, and then continue going back to the start of the question to like refine the pitch, tweak it, really hit home on the right, USPs, I think you call them, and
Yeah.
keep going from there. And believe it or not, we actually landed one six-figure deal out of the show. So it was a win all the way around.
That's a good ROI, especially if you did not sink six figures into the booth itself.
Yeah,
But,
we had minimum viable.
Exactly. That's so awesome. Maybe if we focusing conversation a bit more on the lead generation part, because you were the first, like the only person focusing on sales, meaning that you had like full funnel responsibility in that sense. How did you approach lead generation apart from like the trade show example? Do you do any like automations, or like basically what does your lead generation process look like now?
Yeah, now is not too different. Now I brought on a couple folks, an account executive to support me, as well as a business development rep, for setting as many meetings as possible. But the
Nice.
process isn't all that different. I mean, initially for me, it was just direct outreach. Both industries I had been in before. I had done plenty of prospecting and cold calling, and tried not to overcomplicate it. Just did exactly that. I did get set up with a lead gen tool. I mean, I'll just Zoom info, and we started with that. That was a good way to hit a ton of our contacts and ICPs. Probably not in the most like targeted way initially, but as I brought on the other folks, we had a little bit more bandwidth to do more of that targeted outreach. But realistically, it's using that sort of database to gather as much contact info as possible, and then just old school cold calling. And I think that is
Nice.
particularly true for our industry. But my gut is that it's just going to become more and more important as everybody's emails become more more flooded with generic crummy emails, which is what kind of interests me about Luna. Is there a scalable way to customize these emails and beat those spam filters, so that you don't have to rely as much on cold calling, and maybe book a few more demos without having to spend all day on the phone.
Exactly. That's that's of course what we're trying to build. So we believe that it's possible. But it's an interesting one. So if I understand correctly, you're like basically mostly focusing on cold calling right now, and you have been for the like last X years.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we still have a focus on the mailing campaigns.
Gotcha.
I would
Oh,
just say
nice.
that the majority of our meeting set have been through cold calling. But there's
Oh.
I don't know if that'll vary much by industry, but just in our, that's what we've seen to this point.
No. Did you for like you've been doing this for a longer time? That's what I heard from a couple of people, but I don't know if it's like maybe a confirmation bias or an assumption or something like that. That the connection rate, so to say, so the people that actually pick up their phone, it seems to be decreasing. Is that something that you experience as well? That people are less likely to pick up the phone, or is it like still like it used to be, so to say?
Yeah, well, I'm only so old, despite how I look. So I'm not sure quite how it used to be 10, 20 years ago.
No, but
But
okay, yeah, sorry about that. Did not mean to
no,
to
no,
indicate
no,
any. But
no, no,
I
no.
was like, they
Just
said it like 2, 3, 4 years ago that it looks
yeah,
like there's like people picking up their phone less, or basically do not disturb modes and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah. We would, I would say, to this point, it hasn't seemed to be too much of a drop off from what I saw in past industries. But
Yeah,
also a lot of what we're doing, just to be clear, is a lot of it is just calling into the business. So they have to pick up the phone, right? And then it's
fair one.
just, can you beat that? Can you beat that gatekeeper or not? But
That makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Maybe one interesting question also, like that's also out of personal interest. Do you see a role for AI in the cold calling process? Because the emailing one is pretty straightforward, like at the base level, and you can make it as complex as you want and as you can. But for the cold calling process, do you see any like any functionality there, like any features that any roles that AI can play in that process?
Yeah, I haven't put a tremendous amount of thought into it. My feeling is that people are like who just we as humans are good at detecting what is real and what's not, especially when we hear it. Right. So if I
Yeah,
was looking for where I think AI could be an efficiency booster in prospecting specifically, I would imagine that that email is going to have more success. I think a lot of folks, if they got an AI call and they're chatting with a bot, no matter how good the bot is, they're probably going to pick up on it, at least for the foreseeable. I don't know how long, but
probably.
probably 5 years or 10 years or so. Email is a lot
Yeah,
harder, and that's where if you can pull off. And I was just doing this earlier today with one of my sales reps. If you can go through their website, find something unique about it that actually matches up with what one of our unique selling points is, and reference that, like that is something that I'm having my guys do on a daily basis that I know takes a lot of time. If AI
yeah.
can accurately do that, I think that would be a huge time saver, and a huge efficiency booster, which so that in the short term, that is certainly what I see as most interesting in terms of AI and prospecting.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine as well. Like there was this demo going viral about like I think it was a cold call for Tesla or something like that. Maybe you've seen it on LinkedIn as well, which was interesting because on the one hand you're like, oh, this is so amazing that it can actually have a proper conversation and ask questions and stuff like that. But on the other hand, like if they would call me, then probably if you have like a half a second wait time with like you basically you almost hear it say processing and then it starts talking, right? So
Yeah.
for I can imagine like there's so much dynamic in cold calling in the first 30 seconds of the call, with like what you said, like all of these objections and people do not necessarily want to speak to you, stuff like that. It's probably there's a lot of subtlety in there and that's probably difficult for an AI to figure out.
Yeah, and if that becomes like projecting out, if that becomes more mainstream, if it gets into the zeitgeist of using AI calling, I do think that'll diminish the likelihood of getting through to somebody through traditional calling, right? If folks do just get into a, I mean,
Yeah,
and I've even had people say this where like they just don't pick up the phone when it's a number they don't know anymore, um, and that's just like a personal anecdote outside of work. But if AI calling becomes more widespread, then I imagine everybody's going to fall into that bucket, and maybe you will be, or we will be a lot more reliant on email at that point.
exactly. I can imagine if the costs of calling go down in terms of, well, like now there's a lot of like time cost, probably also anxiety costs for a lot of salespeople as well, because you need to force like they need to force themselves to actually jump on the call. If you can lower that and
Yeah,
you can just press play and it just starts like auto dialing, parallel dialing, and basically calling 100 people at the same time, then if everyone starts doing that, then you're basically you'll buy phones without a phone number. You'll just get like iMessage and like I'm done.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't want to call anyone anymore. Yeah,
I completely
that would
agree.
be cool. Awesome, cool. Actually, I have one last question left for this interview. You mentioned that in terms of email, it would be awesome if like you could find something on the website and then like use that in the email. Basically, get rid of that entire manual process. Um, that let's say that is done and that works and that works exactly as you want it. What would be for you the next best thing if you're currently looking at your setup, at your process and stuff like basically if you could have all the time and resources in the world and you're like, okay, I just need this one feature that's going to make my life a whole lot better, because as I said, well, as Luna, we're also trying to figure out what kind of platform we want to build. Do you have any idea what that feature would be?
One feature, can you narrow it in a little bit more for me, specifically for email prospecting and like website scraping, or a little bit more vague than that?
Whatever you want. Like specifically, we as Luna, we're like a sales and email tool, like sales and AI tool specifically focused on email right now.
Yeah.
We want to expand that, of course, so it can be. But the interesting thing is, there's basically if there's one thing in your sales process where you're like, it's so weird that we're still doing this manually, or like there's no way we're ever going to automate this, or well, anything that you can think of which would help you 2x the number of deals you can close with the current team?
I would say first idea that comes to mind is auto recaps of phone calls with the
Nice.
like action items documented out. And then if you really want to take it a step further, if there was a way to then like pre-populate. So if the action item is like sending over a case study and blah, 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 and you've already loaded up your case study and whatnot into some sort of portal. And now that automatically takes that call summary and creates the email. And now that email is ready to send, after a proofread by the rep. I'm going to say that would be, and like even that for demos too, like kind of zooming out a little bit, like there's nothing that I personally hate more than having to do like long write-ups after demos. And if that could be something that could be automated, I think that would probably be what would 2x my and my team's efficiency.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Like for Zoom calls and stuff like that. Have you guys ever tried out like AI note takers? There are a couple on the market for like Zoom calls, but they don't work for phone calls. It would be very, very cool if you could do it for phone calls as well.
Yeah, we've tried some of the AI. I forget which one. I think Fathom, maybe. Not to name drop somebody, but I think I already used Zoom Info. We've
That's no
used
problem.
them. It's pretty good. Naturally, room for improvement, and they don't extend further to pre-populating what the action item is. And I think that is something that is certainly within the realm of what some algorithms could pull off. So that would be my
100%.
extension to it.
100%. Amazing, man. Thanks so much. That's very valuable and very, very, very helpful. We're coming to the end of the interview. Is there anything that you would like to share with everyone listening? Like, it can be anything about what you want to talk about Enklu, shameless plug. Feel free to take the stage and basically share whatever you want to share.
Yeah, let's talk about Trump versus Biden. No,
Nice.
I would say if you heard anything that you found interesting in terms of Verse Immersive and being part of the only headset based AR entertainment company in the world, we are growing quickly. So if that sounds like something you would be interested in being a part of, hop on board. Shoot me an email. My email is Connor, my first name CONNOR at Enklu ENKLU.com. And otherwise, check out one of our Verse Immersive locations. We are, where are we currently? We're in Denver, Chicago, Dallas, Orlando, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, soon to be Cincinnati. So expanding quite quickly. Go check it out.
Very cool. Very good. Do you have the one in San Francisco still? I think you mentioned that in the beginning.
Yeah. So we, as part of, for those that might have caught on to the model of us creating software and creating content and operating, that is unsustainable to do all of those things with single digit people. So what we did is for San Francisco and Denver, we ended up closing those as we moved to the model of purely licensing. Initially, the plan was let's open 1 million ourselves, and then we're like, oh wait, it's a nightmare to manage people. So we are out of San Francisco. Denver was replaced essentially by a licensee, so we didn't have to operate that one. And then we still have our own location that we do still operate. Always going to have our test kitchen in Chicago, where most of the team is.
Very cool. Very cool. Amazing. Thanks so much. We'll put the information that you just mentioned also in the description of the YouTube video. Connor, I want to thank you very much for taking the time, jumping on and sharing your experiences. A lot of wisdom and a lot of insights. in this call. And to everyone watching, thank you very much for tuning in, and we hope to see you again at the next episode. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks, Stephen.